All right, welcome everyone. Today is our first video in our newest project, the Marble Maze project. I'm obviously your host and teacher, Mr. McDonald. So today in this project, we got a couple of big new concepts we're going to start working on. So one is the idea of something being fully constrained. So all that means is we're going to tell Fusion exactly where something is at, so that way we can't accidentally move it. The second big thing we're going to talk about is dimensioning. We've done a little bit of that in our first project with putting the length and the width and the height of our puzzle cubes, but there's a little bit more to it now. We're going to dive a little bit deeper. And then the third is a couple of new skills we're going to use in Fusion, which are offset and project. So more to come there. All right, so fully constrained. So again, that's defining the exact position of something in your sketch. So that way it can't accidentally be altered. You have to go back in and remove the constraints so that way you can move something. It also enables Fusion, when you send something to a CNC or to a 3D printer, to know exactly where it needs to go. It helps with that, creating that G code. Again, it's achieved by adding dimensions, is what we're going to talk about today. Also constraints. So Fusion does do some auto constraining. We haven't talked too much about that yet, but we will probably, I'll at least mention it in the video as we go along, and we'll talk about it more in upcoming projects. Very quickly, you're able to tell if a sketch has been fully constrained by a couple of different ways. So the overall sketch, when you first start, will have a pencil icon on it. Once everything that you are doing in that sketch has been fully constrained and you finish the sketch, it'll turn to this red lock icon. You'll be able to tell if things are constrained as you go along. When you first draw the rectangle, it'll look more like this with the blue lines around it. If you lock it into something that's already constrained, like we've got over here, we've got this black line. So this line here is constrained. The rest of these are not constrained yet. Whereas this bottom rectangle, you'll notice all four sides are black. I've got some dimensions going on here, so it's been fully constrained. You can't see them in the picture, but I will show it here in an upcoming slide. So speaking of that, dimensions, our next big concept we're going to talk about. So those are essentially, you're adding numbers to your sketch that are going to define the length, the width, the size, the shape, the location, and orientation of your geometries. Geometries just meaning lines, rectangles, circles, squares. Anytime we talk about geometries, it's just another word, fancy word for saying the shapes or the parts of your sketch. Some of those dimensions can be done when you first sketch your geometry. So if you make a line before you do the second click, you can always type in a number, let it know how long it is. When we did our 3D puzzle cubes earlier, we did that first click and then we typed in our 3/4 or 0.75 to let it know that the length and the width and the height were all 3/4 of an inch. Same thing with circles. When you first draw a circle, you can type in the diameter. That makes it very easy to at least get the right size before you click and kind of lock it down in place. That said, some dimensions need to be done after you've sketched that geometry. So as you notice on the previous slide, when I drew this rectangle here, it wasn't fully constrained because I don't have dimensions in yet. I have to do some of those after the fact, but before I press the finish sketch button. So here in this picture, you can see when I first drew this rectangle over here, I did this one when I first drew the rectangle. Our walls in this project are 1/8 of an inch, so I just did 1/8. Fusion converted that to the decimal. This one down here, I could have done before or after. This is the length of the rectangle. There's another dimension you can't really see, but you can see the beginning of the dimension arrow here. There's a number down here in the screen, in Fusion screen, and I'll kind of show that here in a little bit. Now on to a couple of skills that we're going to learn in this project. One is called project. This is what you're looking for in the screen. We got our keyboard shortcut letter, so it's the letter P. What project does is it literally projects, or if you look at the icon, you kind of got like a light box down here, and it's shining that square up onto another sketch. So it projects a selected geometry. In the icon, it's a square, and you can do lines, circles, whatever, from a previous sketch into your new active sketch. Very useful for the next tool. This again is found near the bottom of the Create dropdown in Sketch Tools, and our shortcut key is P. Every time we see this letter off to the far right in the menus in Fusion, we know that's a shortcut key. So we can either left click on it, or we can just remember the buttons and get to them a little bit quicker. Our other skill we're going to talk about real quickly is offset. So this allows you to copy and create a second version of a sketch, a specified distance from the original. So if you look at the icon, you've got this black original C or curve here, and they decided to make another C or curve a little bit bigger than the original. So very helpful when you're trying to make things like walls, or you're trying to put one object a very specific distance from the original object, and you're not trying to copy and paste. It just does it very quickly. This is, again, a sketch tool, and it's found in the Modify section. So unlike this one, which is in Create, this one's in Modify. Shortcut key, it's actually right side by side. So this one is a O. So O for offset, P for project. All right, now we are on to Fusion. All right, so we got Fusion fired up over here. You can see all my recents. So first thing we're going to do is we're just going to go and click on Untitled up here, get us into a brand new file. First thing we always do is save our files. So I'm going to click on the Save icon. I'm going to call this Marble Maze. I'm going to change where I'm saving. Since this is for my videos, I'm going to go down to my video file folder, and I clicked on the wrong one. And I don't yet have one folder for the Marble Maze, so I'm going to click on my new folder button. All of our projects should be going in their own unique folder. So Marble Maze, type it in, hit enter. Once I've done that, I need to make sure I click on it, double click on it, so it goes up here into the location. So once I've got the name of my file, Marble Maze, I've got my location, I'm under video files, and I'm in the Marble Maze project folder. I can just go ahead and hit save. If I just want to see a partial screen, I can hit this arrow and then hit save. I'll know I'm completely saved by watching this up here. It'll change from Untitled to the name of my file. I'll get a version number. Since this is the first time I've saved it, it'll be version 1. And this icon will go from the original, it went to a check mark at one point, and then to the orange square. At this point, I'm perfectly saved. If, for whatever reason, I just went ahead and closed out Fusion and I'd made some changes and I forgot to save, again, it'll auto-save for me right to this location. So that's why we always save first before we do anything. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and start working on our Marble Maze. So first thing I'm going to do is talk about the planes. We haven't really talked about that too much. This is the first time we've got a project that it really matters. So if we think about our Marble Maze, if we look at it from the side, all we see is the walls of the Marble Maze. If we look at it from the bottom up, you know, it's just a big blank space. So really, where we've already done our sketch was from the top down view. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to just make this easy on ourselves. We're going to click on top here in the view cube to spin our workspace to the top down view. Then we're going to go ahead and create sketch. That's what we do about 90% of the time. So I'm going to press create sketch. You'll notice I don't have to see all three planes at this point since I already spun my workspace to the top down view. So all I've got to do is click on the plane square that is left, invisible, and that'll allow me to start my sketch. Our marble maze is a 12-inch by 12-inch square. Squares are rectangles, so I'm going to go up here to my 2-point rectangle tool. You can also keyboard shortcut that. If you look at the pop-up window, you've got 2-point rectangle and then parentheses you see an R. Whatever's in the parentheses, that's our keyboard shortcut. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to left click on this. Since I picked 2-point rectangle, I've got 2 points where I can click. You'll notice if I leave my cursor, it says place the first corner. Best practices, a lot of times, is to start your sketch of your first geometry in the origin. This helps to fully constrain the full sketch. So I'm going to left click here. I'm going to drag out a little bit here up and to the right. So now I've got my 2 text box. So I didn't really go into detail before, but these are dimensions here. So we've got our length and our width, or length and our height of our top-down sketch here of our marble maze. So I'm just going to go ahead and type. So instead of 2.9 inches like it's showing, I'm going to type in a 12, hit tab. You can't see it anymore, but there's a 12 way up in the above the top of the screen. Once I hit tab and move to the other dimension, where it's now 4 inches, I'm going to change that to a 12 and hit enter. Now, keyboard shortcut, I can press F6 here and it will zoom to fit this square into the screen. I can also go down here to my navigation pane, and this button that's in the middle, it's a magnifying glass with a square in the middle of it. That is the fit button. If it's not defaulted to fit, you've also got zoom window, but I'm just going to go ahead and click and select fit. And there you go. Now it has moved that square out, so it fits in my screen, makes it a lot easier to see. We can now see our numbers, our 12s for our 2 dimensions. To start talking about it, we've got some icons up here on the both sides and up at the top and the bottom. These are called constraints, and you've got a whole section here up in the top middle about constraints. If you kind of look at the icons, you may have to zoom in a little bit to see them. They kind of zoom with it. It's harder to see them, but they are these icons right here. So you've got horizontal and vertical. This helps to fully constrain your geometry, which again is our square that we're working on. It lets Fusion know that, hey, this is a perfectly horizontal line. This is a perfectly vertical line. We've started at the origin. We've gone up 12 inches. We started at the origin here. We went over 12 inches. Since it's a square, it knows exactly where all 4 of these walls are. It knows all the angles. Very easy for Fusion to send the information to either a router or a 3D printer to make this exact geometry if we needed to at this point. So now I'm done with the base sketch. So this is the bottom of our 3D maze. So I'm going to go ahead and click Finish Sketch. Now we're going to get into best practices. We've been doing this. So we're going to rename our sketch. And this is where it starts to make a little bit more sense. Before we were just doing cubes over and over, so it was kind of okay if it just said sketch 1. But in this project, we're going to end up with multiple sketches. It makes it a lot easier to fix things after the fact if you rename them. So after I left clicked on that arrow to open up the sketch folder in my browser, if I right click where it says sketch 1, I can go down about halfway and click on rename, and I can call this whatever I want. Best practice is try to be as descriptive as possible as to what that sketch is. In this case, we're already in the marble maze, so we know it's the part of the marble maze, but this is the base of our marble maze. So very simple. I'm just going to call this sketch base. All right. So my next step is going to be to create the outer walls of my marble maze. So I'm going to do another sketch. You'll notice it zoomed out a little bit, focused on the origin. It's okay. But I'm going to go ahead at this point and I'm going to fit it again. I want to see the whole thing. I'm even going to zoom out just a little bit just so I can see all four walls or lines of my original square. So this is where we're going to use a couple of those new tools that we talked about in the slide deck before. So I'm going to come over here to create. I'm going to click this drop down menu. And I'm going to go second to the bottom, which is this project/include. And I'm going to project. So I'm going to left click here. Again, I could have pressed P, that's my shortcut. But you can see the tooltip that popped up with a little bit of a description. Once I left click on it, we get our pop-up window. We should start to get used to this with Fusion. We always want to look over here and see what our options are. In this case, it's on select, and it's telling us, hey, select your geometries that you want to project. So our geometries that we want to project are the four lines of our original square. So I'm just left clicking each one of them to select them, turn them blue. And you'll notice over here, I went from select to for selected. And the way I did it with specified entities. I could have done a whole body, but I'm not getting into that yet. So at this point, I'm going to click OK because I told Fusion, hey, I want to project or use these four lines in my new sketch. So I click OK. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create an offset version of those four lines. So we're going to come over here to modify. It's one of the default buttons, but if for whatever reason, say I've done a lot of other things and my buttons have rearranged, I can always click on the drop down, come here, see offset, again, keyboard shortcut, the letter O. And we'll left click on it. And again, we're going to look at our pop-up window. In this case, our select is saying what curves are we looking to offset. In this case, it's those lines we just projected. So I'm just going to click on one of them. You'll notice when I hover over it, all four lines highlight at once. So I'm going to left click on it. I've got an arrow here where I can just drag. We've done that a little bit before. I've got a dimension tool here, which is our distance pop-up. So in this case, all of the walls in our project are 1/8 of an inch thick. So I'm just going to type 1/8. You'll see here also in the pop-up, it populated that information. I could do it two-sided, and I could make another one 1/8 of an inch, or -1/8 of an inch. So now I have one on the inside and the outside. But again, I don't want to do all that. I'm just going to do one-sided. If for whatever reason it decided to try to put it on the inside, I could flip it. Don't need all that. I'm just going to hit OK. So now if I look at my sketch, I've got basically two squares, one just slightly bigger than the other. It's exactly 1/8 of an inch on each side bigger, or 2/8, 1/4 of an inch total bigger from one end to the other. At this point, I'm going to press Finish Sketch because I'm done creating my outer walls, or the sketch for my outer walls. And I'm going to rename Sketch 2 so that way I have it nice and clean and I've got my file organized. So just like before, I'm going to come over here to the browser. I'm going to right click where it says Sketch 2. I'm going to rename it. And I'm going to call this my outer walls. So a couple places to check. So you've got your names here. If I hover over my timeline icons, I can see, hey, this is where I sketched my base. This is where I sketched my outer walls. So if I was, 10 icons deep, I've extruded, I've done some lofting, whatever, made some holes. If I needed to figure out, hey, my walls really needed to be 5/8 of an inch big or thick, I could just hover over, find the one that says outer walls, double click on it to bring it up, and make the necessary adjustments. And the way I would make those necessary adjustments, over here I can see my dimension number where it says 1/8 of an inch. If I double click on this, I can change this to say, 1.5 inches. And now all of a sudden it'll create my 1.5 inch walls. So to undo, I can just go back in and change the number, or I could hit the undo arrow up at the top. Once I've made any necessary changes, I just hit finish sketch. So again, you don't have to do that. I'm just showing you how you would go through and fix or change something. All right, so at this point, we've got our 2 sketches to make our base, or essentially it's going to make the shell of our marble maze. So I'm going to start extruding, because right now we've got some 2D geometries. I need to get some 3D bodies and shapes going here. So I'm going to click the extrude button. We've done this one a lot. Keyboard shortcut there. Our keyboard shortcut for extrude is E. First one I'm going to do is the base. So I'm going to click on the inside square. If you notice, when I first pulled it up in my pop-up window, profile, select, asking me what do I want to extrude. So start with the inside. Everything here is good. I'm just going to do it one-sided. I'm going to do it by a distance. Similar to our thickness of our walls, our base is 1/8 of an inch. And I'm going to click OK. I'm going to leave this as new body because this is going to be body number 1. Once I've done that, you'll notice my sketch for my outer walls has disappeared. Here in a second, we're going to bring that back, so don't panic yet. I am going to do a little bit of cleanup, so I'm going to hit the arrow to the left of bodies, and I'm going to rename body 1 to base. All right, so now I'm going to work on extruding my outer walls. So I need to bring that sketch back. If I'm over here in my browser, you'll see the eyeball icons. The one by outer walls has a slash through it, basically saying, hey, I can't see it. So if I click that button, my outer walls appear again. So now I'm going to extrude to make those outer walls. So extrude. We check our pop-up. First thing it's asking is, hey, what kind of profile do we want? And I'm going to zoom in because this makes it a lot easier. So I'm just going to click right here in the middle between the 2 lines of my wall, because all I want to have selected is that kind of picture frame here. Our walls in this project all have a height of 1 inch. Now I'm going to go ahead and do join, because in the end, I'm okay if when I go ahead and do appearances at the end, if the walls in the base are the same color. If I wanted to make them separate colors and make it easy on myself, I could do new body. So that way when I go to do the appearance, I can just change the whole color of the body. But even if I do join, I can change it on the face. So we're going to go ahead and do join. I'm going to 3D spin it to show it. And you know what? Base probably isn't a good description here at this point. So we're going to go rename base and outer walls. All right. So there we go. We've got the initial shell of our marble maze. If we wanted to make it look like one of our tabletop labyrinth games, which are made out of wood, I can now go into appearance. I just pressed A on my keyboard. Let's call this maybe a maple. So here in the library, I'm gonna type in maple. I'm gonna go down. I'm gonna find a nice, stained semi-glass that looks kind of decent. And we're just gonna drop it on in. Since it's all one body, the whole thing turns to that look. If I wanted to change how dark it looked, I could double click on the maple. I can then kind of drag it over a little bit. And you'll notice it has early wood color, late wood color. I can change, how dark the lines are, things like that. There's a whole bunch of options here. So removing pores, adding pores, all sorts of fun little features. So at this point, that's our marble maze. In our case in class, we're going to be making these out of cardboard. So I'm just going to go ahead. I don't think cardboard's an option, but we will find out. Helps if I spell it correctly. It's not. So we're just going to go with plastic. Plastic is pretty nice and easy. We've got a lot of 3D printers, so we can pretend like we're going to make a 3D print of this. Brown is not an option, so we're just going to pick black for now. And I'm actually just going to change, let's see, where's a decent brown? Maybe about there. And just hit done. Okay. Now if I hit top down, you can see it looks good from there. If I hit the house on the view cube, going out 3D, we can see it there. If I wanted to hide these sketch lines, it's kind of cluttering it up a little bit. I can hide those, give it a more clean look. And so next up, we're going to start working on our inner walls, which is really where a lot of the meat and potatoes of this project comes. So again, I'm going to go back to the top view by clicking on top here in the view cube. I'm going to bring back my outer wall sketches. I don't necessarily need my base sketch. And I'm going to spin this back to where we got the origin in the bottom left. So I did that by going over to my view cube and hitting the arrows so that way it rotates 90 degrees.